Welcome to Season 1, Episode 5 of Digital Dissection, where we take a closer and possibly unnecessary look into our favorite properties. Today's episode hits the go, baby, go button as we get wired up here to show a little bit more appreciation for the 2000 action thriller Gone in 60 Seconds.
Before we talk chocolate malts, rent-a-cops, and truck driving school, here are a few housekeeping items. We are Joe and Mark, two dudes who love talking movies, video games, and pop culture in general with you. We're a humble operation that needs your help by liking, commenting, and subscribing. And here's how. You can find us on YouTube at Digital Dissection Podcast. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook by searching for @DigitalDissect1 or Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast. You'll notice we say this pretty much every week. What this does is help us to grow and to keep making sure you've got at least an hour in your workday covered. Now, let's ride. All right, Mark, listen to this here. Let me know if you've ever done this before, because I know I have. Right before getting into my car, I dug into a trunk in my bedroom, dusted off an old leather jacket, held it up, and just said, "You are a bad man." And then I hopped into that car and we drove. You've done this before, right?
No.
Oh, okay. Just me and Nicolas Cage thing. Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thought this was something that more people had done, but maybe that's because not a lot of people really appreciate Gone in 60 Seconds as much as we have.
I would say that maybe I should have lied there just to show my fandom a little bit more.
It's okay. So it turns out really it is just kind of just me and Mark's going along with this episode. No, that's not true. You do like this quite a bit.
Yeah, it's true. I do love this movie. Absolutely.
Yep. And then I think this movie, it is underrated because it did come out at the same time as roughly another at the same time as another car franchise, which really you could say is a franchise because they've had 1,000 movies by now with the Fast and Furious series, which I am not putting down. Those are I love those movies. They're great, but this one tends to have more of a special place in my cinema and nerdy heart than the Fast and Furious movies have, even though they're on I think the 9th movie or the 8th movie. I think it's the 8th movie coming up. And
could
Gone in
be
60 Seconds is just what? It's 2. It's the original and then the reboot one in the 2000s.
Yeah, that's all we've got for this franchise, unfortunately.
And I mean I'm happy what we have, because what we have in the 70s, if you're unfamiliar with it, which for the longest time after me seeing the one in the 2000s, I had no idea it was a reboot. And I think probably for at least 2-3 years. And then I remember randomly walking through, I think of all places, a Fleet Farm and finding a DVD for Gone in 60 Seconds. And it was the original one from 1974. That sounds right. Yeah, 74. Which is a dramatically different movie. They only borrow a few things from the original 1974 movie. You've got the main car being a Mustang that's being driven, except they are two completely different ones. One's a 73 Mach 1 in the original, and the one in the new one is a 67 GT500 with some special plasticking molding around it to make it look just beautiful. And that is, I think, one way just in itself right there is a reason that draws people into this movie is if you're just a car person and you appreciate vehicles, you just go right into the movie just because of that. But getting back to what I had before, other things that it borrows is basically more or less the plot, because it does revolve around stealing cars. I think there's some sort of, I'm guessing it was based on some sort of statistic in the 70s that it only takes about 60 seconds for a thief to steal your car. So lock your doors and all that good stuff, citizens, because your car could be gone in 60 seconds.
One thing I wanted to point out to you before we get too far away from it, the version of Eleanor, the 67 GT 500, they actually made 12 of those. and 7 of them survived production.
Ooh.
Um, they're actually designed by Chip Foose as well. If you've ever watched
Oh yeah.
Overhauling,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's the one that put together that combination of classic American muscle car in plastic.
Well, good for him. I mean, it's basically, I mean, at least in the definitely in the car world now. If you ever like look into like a 67 GT 500, there is basically like you'll see we'll have like 67 GT 500 E for Eleanor because of this movie. And
Mhm.
you basically can buy body kits to basically make a clone of the one from the movie. And it's because of that, like it's just one of the most iconic movie cars of all time. And I know like it's definitely like still like I think my like top 5 cars that I'd ever want to own in my life. The 67 GT 500E is pretty much right at the top.
Except every time you try to get it, something bad happens, right?
Oh yeah, there's that one time I drove it right off the Long Beach Pier. Every
Yeah.
time you try to get to that car, something bad happens. It's a unicorn.
Which is impressive since you've never actually lived there.
Never lived in there. Lived there. I think I've been to California for roughly 24 hours and was nowhere near Long Beach. So that makes that whole feat even that much more impressive.
Well, here's a couple things I wanted to get into just to
Mhm.
talk about this film for a minute because very similar to Ghostbusters, we've got some collaborators on this film who have worked together, who have seen some pretty good success with other blockbusters, and it's really what kind of makes this entry in their careers kind of an anomaly. It's a little bit strange that they all came together and the stars just did not align this time. Now, the first person I wanted to mention was the director, who was Dominic Sena, who actually worked with Nicolas Cage several times. So obviously, Gone in 60 Seconds, this film,
Mhm.
but also 2011 Season of the Witch.
Oh, he was that was the director, huh? All right.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you remember that movie? Because I remember enjoying almost 95% of that film, and it just falls apart in that last 5%.
Yeah.
But either way,
Mhm.
that's just one connection. That's mostly just a Cage and Sena connection. But
Mhm.
the big name here that a lot of folks will probably recognize would be Jerry Bruckheimer, who
Yeah.
is the producer, right? So
Yep, like basically the action producer of the early 2000s and late 90s. Bruckheimer kind of had his hand in almost every major action movie of that era.
yeah, yeah, specifically 3 pretty big Nick Cage ones. So
Mhm.
we've got obviously The Rock, which I mean that should be in the Smithsonian if it isn't already.
Yep, just
Um,
just one VHS and DVD just right next to each other
yep,
in a nice glass case where no
yep.
one can touch it.
And right next to that case would be Con Air, which is also
Oh,
another Bruckheimer and Cage.
beautiful. And which one thing that I would like to know because I've never looked into it. Is that his real hair in that movie? Is it really that long? Did he grow it out to that length specifically for that role?
To be honest with you, if somebody told me that it wasn't, I would not believe them.
Wouldn't believe it. That thing
No.
looked Maybelline like incredible.
Yeah. Oh, he was just
Mhm.
born with it. I'm telling
Oh,
you.
yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
can watch that movie every time, and there's a very, very recognizable scene where his hair is just blowing in the wind,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's gorgeous. It's free flowing. There's no way it's fake. It could be fake. But you couldn't convince me of it.
Oh yeah. And don't be
Wouldn't believe
fooled by the fact that Nick Cage's hairline looks like Lake Michigan, in the deep freeze in December, but we're gonna say it's his real hair
Real
today.
hair. I mean, it
Yeah.
doesn't grow forward. It's just all back, all party, no business. That's
Uh,
that's in a cage.
I guess you just can't get it all, but
No, I
you know,
mean when you own your own island, really, really, can you say you have any business associated with you? Nope, you
and
can't. I'll fire.
he
Not
also owned
fire.
like two
Different
two
island.
castles at one point, didn't he?
He did what?
I'm pretty sure Nick Cage owned 2 castles at one point too.
Why wouldn't he? I have no idea if that's true, but I'm going to completely agree with it. This is a man who, in my mind, would probably would have 3 castles if it were up to no one. It's kind of like when MC Hammer was making his mansion and
Oh
he
yeah.
put in 2 waterfalls, and
Yeah.
someone's like, I know you've got like 5 here, but we think five's a bit much. And Hammer's like, okay, 2, but no fewer, no less than 2 waterfalls. If I have
Well,
a house that has any less than 2 waterfalls, we're tearing it down. We're starting over from the beginning. And you're all fired, and I'm getting new people who will give me my 2 waterfalls.
and anyone who has waterfalls, I'm pretty sure it's just because of the timeless, advice of TLC, right? You just don't want to go chasing them,
No,
so
that's why
just
you
build them in your house.
exactly. You cut out the whole chase. Since I don't have to chase it, I just wake up and they're there.
well, well, before we get too far into building out your own waterworks in your home, the last big Bruckheimer film outside of this one would be National Treasure. Which
Mm-hmm.
I mean, say what you will about those films, but the one thing that connects all four of these is that there's a level of entertainment value to them.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the room doesn't need as much oxygen as it normally would to enjoy it, still they're pretty fun, just for what they
Oh,
are.
completely. And you have to look at just the pure magic that at least National Treasure was, because I think it's the one movie where Sean Bean didn't die. He lived that entire time. Yeah, he gets caught, but he survives. So good on those two.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, his ability to die is just second to none. So if he
Mhm.
survives one of those movies, he's probably got the champagne on ice. Um, but a couple other quick hits for this movie, though, because there
Mhm.
are actually a couple accolades and a few firsts here that I want to point out.
Ooh,
Um,
okay.
so the trailer for this movie
Mhm.
is unique because it's one of the first major blockbusters to actually be narrated by a female voiceover actor. Um,
Ah.
so her name is Melissa Disney. She actually
Mhm.
narrated the theatrical cut trailer for this movie.
Mhm.
And so that it's been widely attributed to Gone in 60 Seconds that this is the first example of it. So if you think about the the early 90s action movies, even the 80s to an extent, you've got pretty much anyone who smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day was able to narrate a movie trailer.
In a world where a
Yeah.
man loves cars so much he has to take all of them. Yeah, that's how you that's
Yeah.
how you introduce something in the 80s and 90s, was just that one thing. And
Or
it's always
50
in a
cars in
world.
one night. Yeah. Yeah, so this one didn't have Don LaFontaine, narrating it. It
Mhm.
was it was Melissa Disney for those of you that want to keep that
Melissa
history
Disney,
knowledge.
which there's no way that's a stage name. Impossible.
No. Yeah, like buck naked, right? There's no way it could be fake. But either way, that one's kind of a cool little item that I found when I was
Mhm.
doing some research on this. The other lesser known accolade for this movie, or I should say, not an accolade, because technically the movie didn't win this. Angelina Jolie lost Worst Hairstyle at the Stinkers Bad Movie Awards to Forrest Whitaker and John Travolta's Battlefield Earth haircuts. And looking back at it, they all kind of look the same, don't they?
They are a bit the same, but how did Battlefield Earth not win every bad possible award and lose every good award? That movie is in itself just one of the worst excuses of cinema that I have ever watched.
Yeah.
Um, with big money and big names put into it, and it was just horrible. Yeah, I guess it's all like, white person dreadlocks for both I guess not Forrest Whitaker, but
I wasn't going to correct you about
he's like not Forrest Whitaker, but I mean John Travolta had white person dreadlocks.
yeah,
Um
based on what I know about Forrest Whitaker, I was like, that one doesn't quite
no, he's
register with
very,
me.
very not white,
Yeah,
Forrest
but
Whitaker.
he's passionate. He's going with it. I'm going to let him do it.
I really have no idea who any of these people are. I'm making this whole thing up as I go along.
Well,
So Mark
that's
does all of the research. I'm just here for banter, and if I get it wrong, I will never acknowledge it.
yeah, and that actually brings me to one of our last points here about what happened with this movie.
Mm-hmm.
So Disney actually wrote off this film as a loss. And
Oh.
Joe, do you have any guess as to what that number could be?
Uh, it couldn't have been much. It has to be. I mean, I'm thinking that you look at production and advertising, and you look at how much money it made. It had to be barely. I'm saying $1. Disney lost roughly $1 on this movie.
Well, you know how we love our money math here, as well as inflation costs. So here's
Mm-hmm.
what we're gonna do. We're just gonna go through the straight up numbers on this. So
Okay.
the budget for the movie was estimated between 90 to $103.3 million.
Okay.
So that's just I'm pretty sure it's just the movie budget itself. I don't know if we're talking marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the box office was $237.2 million.
Okay.
And the Disney write-off ended up being a 202 million loss. So if you translate the year 2000 into 2021 dollars, we're looking at about a $323 million loss on their taxes for the year.
Huh.
So it's kind of a shame that you and I have such an adoration for a film that from almost every other angle, financial, the critics, and it doesn't matter
Mhm.
if you're looking at the critics or the fans, people just did not like this movie.
Yeah. Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
I just everything about this movie I just really really liked it. And we're like when I first watched it with my I watched it with like car friends in high school and like we all loved it. And like you could have taken every human being out of that movie and just had the cars driving around and still would have loved it. Um but like then I watch it on my own and when it's not just me and my car friends and I still love it and it's more than just the cars to me. So yeah, this is this is one of those times where apparently I just legitimately really like what everyone else would consider to be a bad movie.
Yeah, I mean it's really kind of a mismatch. I mean, when I think of the
Mm-hmm.
movies I have on my shelf, I've got a lot of Academy Award winners up there, not being snooty or anything, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of films that I have up there that aren't guilty pleasure style films. I'm looking at you, Euro Trip and Beer Fest. Uh, but but people were brutal towards this film. I mean, if you look at the Rotten
Huh.
Tomatoes side of it, it was a 26% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oof. Ouch.
Um, IMDb has a little bit more sense, and theirs is at 6.5 out of 10.
Yeah, what Metacritic has it at 35. So
Yeah,
also low. Also low. Uh
yeah, it got destroyed.
yeah.
You know,
This thing it's got just beaten up.
yeah,
Horribly.
that was actually probably the most surprising part of the research on this was that I look back at this and obviously it's the 2000s, right? Like this was the younger Mark that didn't have any kind of, inflammation or joint
Mm-hmm.
problems. This was the Mark that just sat down and loved movies for movies.
Mm-hmm.
And other people had said that this movie was either boring, unrealistic, forgettable.
Huh.
Other folks said that it was action lacked instead of action packed. And others said it was overstuffed. So I honestly don't quite understand how it can be that many things to so many different people, but be mutually adored by, you, myself, my brother
Mm-hmm.
and I bonded over this movie. And it's really strange because the original Gone in 60 Seconds, I've only seen a handful of times,
Mm-hmm.
and this movie did borrow, certain elements of the original,
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. It did
um,
a few homages to the original movie.
yeah, instead of 48 cars, it's 50,
It's 50.
we,
You can, a
we,
round number is a little more fun. I guess they're both round numbers, but
yeah,
a
we get up the
0 at the
stakes.
end better than an 8.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
you get up the stakes a little bit,
Oh yeah,
if
completely.
you spend more money on it, you got to have more
Mhm.
cars.
Yeah.
We still obviously have one of the cars having heroin in it when they steal it,
Yep. Which yeah, they do repeat that scene very well. And again, like I find the newer one more entertaining with the heroin car. Um, mostly because I think the heroin car is actually very close to my first car that I had. Um, I think it's like a GM G body car that they use for that.
Oh
I
man.
think
Yeah,
I'm fairly positive.
I'm not 100% sure what
No,
car
no, it's not because it's a
website
Cadillac
is.
Eldorado is what they use, and I don't think that's a G body.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean,
It's okay.
the whole part of that joke, and we don't want to give everything away here, but
Mhm.
this is a pretty simple joke. It's just the
Yeah.
fact that, somebody wanted to contribute to the job who's done nothing so far, steals one car, and guess what? It's got a trunk full of heroin,
Yep. And he never paused to think as to why a car in that part of town would have its doors unlocked. Because no one's stupid enough to boost a car in that part of town, Freb. Go back to ordering pizzas.
People got to eat, right? Yeah. Yeah, I will say, it's definitely kind of turning that whole reboot business on their head,
Hmm.
right? Like we've seen a lot of reboots in our time. We
Yep.
obviously just talked about the Ghostbusters connection on that.
Hmm.
But there's like things like Total Recall. There's usually some kind of take that you get in the new reboot that just doesn't quite feel like it needs to be there.
Yeah.
And in this one, I didn't ever get the feeling that it even really felt like a reboot. I
No,
mean,
no, it's I think it's because again, like the callbacks to the original. Like people who watch the original movie will see like a few things here and there that feel familiar, but like they do so much more with this story. And I think it's a shorter movie too compared to the original one. I think they do more with this story. Let's see, the runtime is an hour 58 versus the old one, which I feel like the car chase alone was almost an hour and 50 minutes. I'm kidding. There's a 40-minute car chase in the original movie at the end of it.
mhm.
Um, but I think they do a lot more in this one because in the original movie, it's literally you've got a newcomer coming into the main character's basically car stealing business. They go over how they steal cars, how they swap out VIN numbers with ones that have been totaled, and then they sell off the ones that were stolen to people who are just willing to buy the cars for a higher price. That's how they make their money.
Mhm.
And then there's this South American buyer that wants these 48 cars. So they have like a week to steal these 48 cars. And that's basically the movie. And like a lot of things in the 70s, like pacing was different. So the point where like I felt like I was actually, I don't know, kind of bored throughout most of the original Gone in 60 Seconds. There are definitely some character things that were fun, a few car chases that were great. Looking at the old cars is also really cool too. So that's always fun. But when you look at the involvement that is in the newer Gone in 60 Seconds, you have this great underpinning reason as to why the cars have to be stolen, other than like we're just getting paid to do this job.
Yeah.
You have the main character, Nicolas Cage's brother, basically fumbled and botched this job before. So Nicolas Cage is coming in to make up for his little brother's mistakes. And they get to the point where, all right, we've got this much time left to steal the cars. We're going to use all this time to basically get ready to shop around for the cars, and we're going to steal them all in one night.
To your point
Mm-hmm.
about the reasoning for stealing the cars, okay, here's a connection that I wanted to make sure that people knew about. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of a cute one, okay?
Yeah.
So Will Patton, who plays Atlee Jackson, he's the guy that has been working with Nick Cage's character,
Mm-hmm.
Memphis Reigns, in the past, and he's kind of the connection to the underworld. All of the dark ponies in South Beach. They all know this guy. They know Atlee
Mm-hmm.
Jackson. He's one of the old horses, right?
Yep.
Well, when Atlee Jackson says that Kip Raines, so Giovanni Ribisi played him, and he's the
Mm-hmm.
younger brother. So when he says that Kip took a job and he fumbled it, I always cracked up at that because Will Patton also is in another Jerry Bruckheimer produced film, Remember the Titans, which, if you remember, he played, the head coach for the high school that Denzel Washington ends up taking over for as head coach, right?
Yeah.
So I just find it funny that Will Patton was in two different Brockheimer films and then just happens to be in a football film and says fumbled it in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Just one of those fun little Brockheimer connections. It's instead of the degrees of Kevin Bacon, we should really be doing the degrees of Jerry Brockheimer at this point. But
Or it's like some sort of our big bizarre like Bruckheimer shared universe. Is it's his attempt at this was the MCU before the MCU was a thing. Was Bruckheimer just connecting his movies with all these small little things?
the BCU, the Brockheimer Cinematic Universe. And you know what? We could piggyback off of Pirates of the Caribbean as well. I mean,
Hmm.
there's so much we could play with here,
Yeah.
but yeah, sorry to distract for a moment, but that was one of those things where you're looking at it, you're like, you just can't help but notice that breadcrumb led somewhere.
Hmm.
Um,
And even his character Atlee Jackson, I think that's the only reused name from the original movie. It's kind of like another like just little nod they did to the original one. So like again, like so I guess those nods we talked about a little bit was of course the scene where you've got the Cadillac filled with drugs, and the police are basically right there with a stolen car.
mhm,
You've got Atlee Jackson, who's reused as a reused name. The character is significantly different in the original movie than it is in this one.
yeah,
The lead car being a Mustang called Eleanor, um, also a reused thing. However, Eleanor in the first movie, the reason why it was supposed to be sought after is for a little car history for all y'all. Um, is that it's a 1974 Ford Mustang Mach 1, which looking back on them, like they're pretty big boats. Like they are awfully huge cars. Like the Mustang had definitely let itself go in its last 3 years with the title of Mustang in the 70s. And then in 74, we get the oil crisis and all the muscle cars scale down. They don't all physically scale down, but power goes down dramatically in all of them. And this is, of course, when Lee Iacocca, the man who had made the Mustang, redesigned it from the big muscle car body. And he's like, no, we're going to bring it back to its roots and have it go back to a smaller car. And he makes the Mustang 2, which everyone didn't immediately hate, believe it or not, because I think to this day, that's still one of the best-selling Mustangs ever, was the Mustang 2 when it came out. As much as people like to really hate on it, Ford now comes out and says that basically that was the right car for the right time, even though it had zero power. You could literally get like a Cobra performance Mustang that had like a probably like 60 horsepower 4-cylinder engine in it. It was just laughable. But that was the reason, though, why this car was so sought after. And they specifically say this is the last of the Mustangs, which is why they want it in that movie. And then that's now the hero car that goes into the 40-minute chase. Whereas this car, they don't really explain. They change that. It's no longer the last of the Mustangs is the reason why. They actually like kind of give this spirituality to the car, where its relationship with Nicolas Cage's character, Memphis Reigns, is that he kind of always has something go wrong when he tries to steal this one specific car. And they have a scene where they describe when they first see Eleanor at the Long Beach International Towers, which is also a callback to the original movie because that's where that Eleanor is stashed too. He drives it off the Long Beach Pier. He has an engine blowout. Just everything goes wrong when he tries to steal that car. And that's what they use this time to kind of bring up the drama of why this car means so much as opposed to it's the last of its kind.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the whole mystical side of it is funny because since we've got these multi-generational levels of folks involved in stealing these cars, because even though Kip and Memphis don't really seem that old, right? I mean, they don't seem like they're that far apart.
No.
But you do have entirely different teams that comprise who tried to boost the cars of old and who's boosting the cars of now, right? And so it's just kind of funny how the younger generation, they all know about the story and they all know about why Eleanor's never been captured, So I always thought that was fun.
Almost all of them, because of course our man Freb did not know about it. He didn't even know what a unicorn was for some reason. That had to be explained to him.
It's true. Yeah, Freb gets beaten up on a lot in this film. If you guys don't know who Freb is, Freb is one of the guys that just has absolutely nothing to do with any of the process in stealing cars.
Yep. They at one point they go over basically all the skill sets of all the different the newer generation of people, the newer generation of the boosters, and they go through everyone and they get to Freb and there's well, Freb orders pizzas like it's no one's business.
Yeah.
And that's his ability.
And they don't even call him Freb at first, right? He gets dissed before they even say his name.
Oh yeah.
So Donnie looks at him, Donnie Astricky, who's obviously one of the original crew. He calls him Gilligan.
Who's Gilligan here and what does he do?
So Kai McBride, who plays Donnie Astricky, he goes, so who is Gilligan? What does he do? It's Gilligan is actually Freb. And Freb is not that much better of a name either. But
no, it really isn't. And especially if that's his given name, his parents named him Freb.
Yeah.
That sucks, man. I almost if you're balancing Gilligan and Freb between each other, it's really hard to pick which one's worse.
Yeah, a name like Freb has to be in a family tree. That doesn't just come up in the most popular names of the year.
And really, when you look at the newer generation of boosters, while Freb appears to be the most useless on paper, I argue Toby is the dumbest one out of all of them. He was the one weak part for me in this movie.
Yeah, because he talks about being all tech oriented. He can hack anything. He can do anything he wants.
Yeah, which it's the early 2000s. You need a hacker in your movie.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, you just need it. If you have an action movie, someone's hacking something, and it's always the mainframe that gets hacked.
Yeah, And yeah, and I actually this is something I was going to bring up earlier, but one of the things about the cast of this, I mean, I know obviously we talked about Toby and Freb, and
Mm-hmm.
they're supporting people, but the cast of this movie is one of the reasons why I don't think it deserves nearly as much. Uh, I just as much vitriol that you see online for it.
Oh
Like
yeah. Mm-hmm.
there's so many people that didn't like this movie, but we've talked about Nicolas Cage, who I
Mm-hmm.
mean, once again, we know that this guy deserves all the praise that he gets, and no one can tell me differently.
No, no, no,
Um,
no. I love Nicolas Cage. Like, there's definitely like no rhyme or reason to like the amount that I really, really enjoy Nicolas Cage and everything that he does.
yeah. Oh, this is like peak Nick
Mm-hmm.
Cage as well.
Yeah.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean, this is Nick Cage's best. We've got Giovanni Ribisi, as we mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Robert Duvall, Angelina Jolie. We've got an emerging Vinnie Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And
Also, an emerging Timothy Oliphant in this movie as well.
this is
Mm-hmm.
one of Timothy Oliphant's early movies. Will Patton was also like an early 2000s. Just he was like the cornerstone of several films. I mean, you saw him in more films than you probably remember. Um, and
Yeah,
so I mean,
Armageddon. If you really need that spelled out like that, if you need one there. If you've watched the 2000s films and you somehow missed Armageddon, like I don't know what you were doing in that
yeah.
time period.
Oh, I don't. I mean, seriously, I know what I was doing, and it was watching Armageddon. That's the only thing I was up to back then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Uh,
and that's just the most of the main cast, right?
oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you had the big bad played by Christopher Eccleston, the Ninth
Yes,
Doctor himself, who great job in both roles as Doctor Whom and Raymond Calitri in this one.
yeah. As Raymond Calitri, that's where I've actually read some of these reviews of people saying that that's where it felt unbelievable, and
With
I
a
thought,
with a British villain, that's like half of our movies.
well, I don't know. I mean, this isn't me. Once again, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
me. I'm just showing you what I've seen, but he actually, even though some of the dialogue was, it felt like standard action movie, it felt kind of corny in the moment, but
Mm-hmm.
he still is he delivers real evil to me
Yeah,
as Raymond Calitri. Feels believable. But
I do. Yeah, he has a bizarre obsession with wood. Don't get that. That maybe that's the unbelievable part. Like it's warm, it's natural. Which even then, I don't know. I guess it's not. That's not far and removed from a villain wanting to return things to a simpler time, which is usually why they want to destroy everything. But in this case, he just has to get cars to people in South America.
yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
once again, man, it's this is the stuff I didn't even know about what people didn't like about this movie. It just doesn't seem to make any sense. But ultimately, I thought he delivered. I mean, I've never really seen Eccleston in a role where I didn't appreciate, his depiction.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately for him, this we won't go too far into this, but he's one of those people that has really been choosy with his roles, right? Like he did pick some early 2000s movies where he kind of came across the pond, and there was some fanfare, um but for him to not really, want to live in the mainstream anymore, it's kind of a shame, because every time I've seen him, I've liked him, whether it was
Mm-hmm.
Doctor Who or he was even great in 28 Days Later. He played an army officer in that, and he was solid there. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of a shame, but
Yeah, no, he was in that The Rise of Cobra, which he was Destro also. He did of the few things I liked about that movie, he was one of them. Um and Thor Dark World, which he did a
yeah,
great job as the antagonist in Thor Dark World.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I usually have not seen him in a film where I question, the prep he did for it.
Hmm.
And but rounding out the cast here, there's one person that I want to bring up that can be easily missed. Who do you think that might be in Gone in 60 Seconds?
Is it James Duvall with no relation to Robert Duvall? Because
No,
James Duvall is Freb, since we've been talking about him quite a bit already.
it's not
No,
him, believe it
no.
or not.
Is it Delroy Lindo?
No, it's Michael
Oh,
Pena, who played
okay.
Luis in the Ant-Man series.
Oh yeah, he has one scene in this movie, which
Yeah,
is also involving Freb
it
because
involves.
Freb shows up,
Yeah,
involves Freb. Yeah, yeah. I forgot I don't know how I forgot about Michael Pena being there.
Yeah. He's just some street tough that shows up, turf disputes, but he's there, and yeah, I always like earmark that for some reason. I don't know why. And then as soon as I saw Ant-Man, I'm like, hey, that dude's gone in 60 seconds. If anything, it just tells you how enduring Michael Pena's career has been, right? I mean, this is over 20 years ago, and he's still relevant, and it just tells you how active he's been. But yeah. Obviously, Robert Duvall is he. I mean, he makes this movie. His presence in the film is fantastic. Because um, he's another one of those people that I've never had a problem with any role he's played.
Oh yeah.
And he brings kind of like a warmth and a almost like a level of description you don't need for any relationship he has with the characters in this. Just the way he behaves around them.
Yeah, very, very fatherly, and he does kind of like this weird like job of like being the bridge between like the old generation of boosters versus the new generation of boosters, where he will, whenever ideas come up, he will kind of like put his effort into it to either like whenever ideas come up that maybe have like a tension flowing between the two groups, he kind of puts himself in the middle to try and reduce that tension.
Yeah, well, he's like an operations manager, right? Like they have him controlling the warboard with all the cars and everything on it. I like to think that the whole naming system came from him anyway, right?
Oh, probably. Yeah, which if you haven't seen it, they name all the cars after girls' names, because if you name them after girls and you're saying you're going to pick up a girl, then anyone who's listening in is none the wiser to what you're actually doing.
But if you're picking up a guy, I mean, I still think that's just as acceptable.
I think you could do that. Yeah. Picking up Tony. Everyone's fine with you picking up Tony. Maybe, but be careful how you pronounce Tony. They may assume it's a gang related thing then, because there's always a Tony in every gang.
Yeah, but what if you're just like a prolific stage actor and you're going to pick up your Tony?
Oh, that's different. I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I mean, they wouldn't even know what they're listening to anymore on that.
Yeah, they're completely gone. Especially if you break out into song about that Tony, he'll tune right out.
Hey, you mentioned Delroy Lindo as well, and I absolutely love Delroy Lindo in this movie. Another just solid actor that somehow ended up in this, and he's actually from the UK, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah.
See, that's what's great. I think how many UK actors can really nail an American accent, and then how many Americans just really mess up a UK accent. So yeah, good on Mr. Lindo there. Had no clue he's from the UK.
Yeah, dude's from the UK. I mean, and once again, I can't say this enough. He's another one of those actors that you never really see him in a bad role. And I remember he was actually also in Get Shorty, if you remember the 1995 comedy about
of course
male strippers, or wait, no, not male strippers. I'm thinking of
no, you're thinking of
movie.
Get
Shorty's a totally different film with John Travolta, Gene Hackman, Danny DeVito. Totally different, like gangster comedy, but once again, solid film.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just the level of talent in this to me just says that the reviews can't make sense. They just can't. I mean, it may be me trying to shoulder, the brunt of millions of other folks' opinions here, but the actors we've mentioned, the performances they give in this, I mean, I just don't quite get how.
No, and I think it falls apart. I think the movie's also brilliantly paced. Like there's no point where I feel like the film lags. You have this you get the status quo nicely put in the beginning of the movie, quickly introduces you into the movie's main problem, and then you got plenty of rising action. You get the climax towards the end of the movie, where they're actually going out and they're stealing the cars, and then you resolve it, and you have a new status quo at the end. And all of it, I think, for what the film is trying to do, is very believable. I mean, it does sound kind of ridiculous, like they're actually like stealing 50 cars in a California city in one night. Because I mean, you think about it, like I just think like when I tell someone I'm going to be ready to like do something, I'm going to leave my house by a certain time, I think, I just have to like get my keys, do a little packing, put the dog away, I'll be fine. 30 minutes later, to do all these simple tasks, I've finally left. And this is, we're somehow like going places, stealing cars, bringing them to this pier, and then leaving and going to steal more cars. that is far-fetched, but it also adds a level of excitement to it, which is the purpose of that whole part. Because when you go to a movie, like, you have to suspend belief for the most part. This isn't a documentary. So when you add this whole, like, we're going to steal 50 cars in one night, because that way it'll be harder for the police to be onto what we're doing, as opposed to playing shadow games and spreading it out over a few days. It's
Yeah,
giving
because
us a higher chance of success, and that's the point of the whole thing. No, of course it's impossible, but it adds stakes to the movie that make it kind of like more intense.
well, we both know that if you play shadow games, the heat is on to you by the second night. So that's why you
Exactly.
just got to do it all at once. But
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what I would like to throw back at people that are kind of coming at this movie sideways, is that if you don't live in like the Los Angeles area, the greater
Mm-hmm.
LA area, just imagine how believable it would be for 50 cars to be stolen in Los Angeles. I mean, to me, that seems like probably the most plausible thing happening in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
is that there's a possibility that cars are being stolen, and a lot of them. And that's why it makes more sense too, even when you look at it from the detective side of this. So even the police are going, no one cares about Grand Theft Auto, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's so commonplace.
Yeah.
That's why it's believable. So you don't even
Yeah.
have to suspend your disbelief if you're trying to figure out why this should work or how it could work. And you've got, 10 different people that are all working together to steal 50 cars. I mean, over the course of a night, I mean, yeah, they're organized. It can make
Yeah.
sense.
Mm-hmm. And
So,
I do love, like, when you're looking at math, I think I remember like making a math word problem for this at one point in time in my academic career, where it was a simple problem where I think that they say some of the movie, it's like when Memphis Reigns left the Long Beach area, it was like something like 65% of all like GTA like numbers just went down.
yes.
So something just ridiculous. So I think like I did something where like I looked up like modern statistics of like how many cars are stolen in that area, like
Hmm.
modern day. And I'm like, and if that's gone down since Memphis Reigns has left, how many cars would be stolen on average in a year when he was there?
Yeah.
And it would be a ridiculous number, by the way. It was just insane. But again, like when you look up like the numbers for it, like at least when I think I did that in high school, and it was like, yeah, actually a lot of cars get stolen in California a year. I mean, that's usually nothing exciting like in the movie. I think what the most commonly stolen car, like when we were in high school, was like a Honda Accord.
Which I'm pretty sure is probably still the case even today. I mean,
Oh, probably. And that's not because people really, really want the Honda Accord to be stolen. It's just because there are just a lot of Honda Accords out there. So they're more likely to get stolen.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if
Mhm.
you're going to steal something to do another crime in, you don't want to pick the flashiest thing sitting on the lot.
No, it's ridiculous. You don't go out there in
Yeah.
a ridiculously big old Cadillac or anything, like a 50s Cadillac that's spraying like fire out of its exhaust on it, which I do use something with that. No. That's a Mercedes I'm thinking of. Um, when it's Donnie Astricky, Chai McBride's character, is first alerted to the fact that all the Mercedes cars are being like observed by the police,
Oh, yeah.
and they're asking where he is, and he's upset and just annoyed by this. He's like, where do you think I am? I'm at the casino picking up the pit boss's lady. What do you want? Um, I'll use that with people on the phone every once in a while, where they ask like where I am.
You're
Like,
just
I'm at
having the
the
baby
casino
right
picking
now?
up the yeah. She's having the baby. Oh, I gotta get this is crazy. This is even my car. I gotta get out of here. I like to point out,
Which,
like,
yeah.
Chai
Yeah.
McBride is just a completely unsung hero of this movie. Donnie Astricky is just so much fun and personality that he adds to that movie. Oh,
Oh,
great! I love
well,
him. Mhm.
well, and the way what I love about this, not just his character, but like when they introduce the old crew,
Mhm.
like they show what the old crew is up to, and it totally feels like what we've mentioned with sequel, the sequel treatment that happens to characters, right? Like they're always
Mhm.
worse off than they were in the first one, and so Donnie is literally a driver's ed instructor, and and of course he's got a woman that just can't figure it out, and
Mhm.
he's you know I remember him saying that he goes, I can't swim, I know I can't, so I keep my ass out of the pool,
Mhm.
and and so like and then he she starts crying, and then he just gets out of the car frustrated, and And the second he gets out, she backs right into traffic.
Yep. And he's
and
like,
gets
just take her around the block.
yeah.
He just says that as he's leaving. Um,
Yeah, I mean,
mhm,
I think that's another one of those elements of this movie that's fantastic. And what it does really well is that it brings you up to speed on the history of everyone in it
mhm,
very quickly. I mean, there are movies that are made by, Academy Award winning directors, and they have 3 times the amount of money thrown at them,
mhm.
and they can't achieve this. I don't know how
Yeah.
it, or why that is, but everyone involved in this movie, um, it's very deliberate in the history that you learn.
Mhm,
And so, like you mentioned before, how this movie, how it goes from scene to scene, and all the context it's given. Like it's very deliberate. It knows what it's building to. I mean, we know what it's building to. It's a
mhm.
pretty simple concept, but we know about the fact that the Memphis being such a prolific, booster of cars, that the second he comes back into town, the police are right there waiting for him, right?
Yeah. Like immediately they know he's there.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
instantly. They know he's there.
And it's not
Uh,
because Lakers got Shaquille.
yeah,
Totally not the reason why he's back in town.
yeah. Yeah, once again, letting you know how long it's been since this movie came out. The
It's been a
Lakers just
minute.
got Shaquille. Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, and now the acting may not be the most superb in some of these scenes, but
It falls apart here and there,
yeah,
but it's
yeah,
lovable when it does. I like to point
yeah,
that out.
yeah. Ultimately, if you're going to attack a movie for structure, I don't think this is really the movie that you do it with,
Mm-mm.
because they do a lot of good building between Memphis and Kip, and explaining that dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
Kip literally just throws it out there and says that when he left, he had no one to look up to anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why he devolved into the life of crime, even though everyone tried to keep him out of it. The same thing goes with Sway and Memphis as
Mm-hmm.
well. So Sway, Angelina Jolie, his on and off again girlfriend, um, the tension between those two actors as they go through their reintroduction as he comes back into town, that's another strong sequence there.
Yeah. And
Um,
I would say, like, again, like, when a director or a writer has a job of introducing a cast of characters, some like to produce a 4 hour plus movie to really flesh those characters out. And others will basically just give, and then again, this is like you had what, probably a good 8 different characters that they're going to flesh out and give backgrounds to. Um, one of them, 4 of them get a montage with the older crew as they're basically going around like, okay, well, we need to get this job taken care of. Who can we turn to? So they go through like basically their little black books of their people they used to do business with, used to boost cars with.
mhm.
And for all characters, even ones who don't actually get seen on the movie, um, some of them have died, and some of them are very very busy at the moment.
Yes.
Um,
Well,
like we
and
get to know all of them though because they go through, they get one scene as they're answering a phone. So you get Donnie, who's now teaching. He's at a driver's ed. Obviously, Robert Duvall, Otto. He's the one going through the phone book
mhm.
with Memphis Reigns. But then you get Vinnie Jones's character Sphinx,
Yeah.
and he's working at a morgue, and he doesn't talk, and he's just very intense with everything that he does. And they establish that within like basically what, 3 seconds, where the people answering the phone are afraid to talk to him
Yeah,
because he
yeah,
never talks to anyone. And
yeah.
then he's having lunch, like he's on his lunch break at
Yep.
the morgue. He takes a bite from his sandwich and puts on a cadaver and then picks up the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that's what I love too, is that one of his
Mhm.
coworkers specifically says, "The guy never talks. How is he gonna take a phone call?" And and then you hear Nicolas Cage on the phone, and he goes, "Sphinx, is it you? Press the button if it's you." And then he
Yep.
presses the button, and I
So
mean,
yeah, again, they do a wonderful job with that. And then when it's time to introduce a new cast of characters, it's when they meet each other and they just go over like, hey, this is Tumblr. He can drive anything with wheels and some things without. And they just go over like what they can all do.
yeah,
And again,
yeah,
like, okay, like that's all you need to know about them. Perfect. We know everyone's skill sets for the new
yeah,
crew. We knew what now all the old crew, we just know that they used to boost cars and we've seen what they've been doing since then. And they're all the ones that are willing to come back are willing to come back. Um,
yeah. I
and
mean,
like they do this and you get like a good, you get good background on all the characters in a matter of minutes, as opposed to, several hours later, we can finally continue with the plot.
Yeah, if anything, like one of the best things this movie does that a lot of others just can't seem to get right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're caught up to speed on all of these people, um, and they're all likable. I mean,
Yeah.
for the exception of Toby, you just
Toby.
you shouldn't be jumping into the back of a car anyway.
No,
He's never
It
done
doesn't.
anything with.
Toby, it doesn't matter if it's rent a cop. He can
Yeah,
still pull you over. He still has a gun, and you're an
yeah,
idiot.
yeah. I mean, I don't know of any rent-a-cops that are going to actively join into a high-speed chase. But hey,
Probably
Toby,
not.
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But that's one thing too that you've brought up a couple of times is we see the old crew and the new crew,
Mm-hmm.
and then we see them join forces where they're literally pairing up with each other as they go out, and what was really cool is that you see them play like these car games, right, when they're out and they're talking through the walkie
Oh, yep.
talkies and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all sharing these old games they used to play, talking about famous vehicles and movies and TV shows and all that kind of
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Oh, yeah, it's so fun. Like they give you the actor and they give you like the series of the movie, and you have to say the car they drove in it. It's
Yeah,
fun
yeah.
game. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the old crew and the new crew, they're all participating in it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just one of those things that it clearly tells you that these folks, even though they haven't seen each other in a long time,
Mm-hmm. Or
that
ever, really. Like
or
they've never
ever,
met
yeah,
before this. Yeah.
yeah, but they're picking up just like an old group of high school friends would,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's kind of what I appreciated a ton was just seeing that kind of interactions between characters because sometimes you have to work with people for quite a long time before you can have that kind of rapport. And so seeing them do that, I mean, it seemed effortless from what I watched, but it was one of those small in between the lines things that I just always paid attention to watching this movie.
And I think I mean, this is something that just one of many things the movie does well is introducing this very diverse, very different cast of characters and having them all come together over this common cause, which turns out to being to save one character's life. Um, and then you also get on top of like their small backstories, because we know enough about their characters and they are peripheral characters, we can now focus a lot on what's been going on with the Rains brothers. So you understand why it is Memphis left. You understand why he had to leave, and we do see some strain on those two working with each other throughout the movie until Kip actually has all this explained to him, and you understand basically why Memphis never explained anything to him, and when he left, uh,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean, because he Memphis thought the best thing he could do for him was to leave,
mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, it didn't end up being that way,
No,
right?
and
Because
he was
yeah,
told by their mother, like, "Hey, you need to go because I don't want Kip turning out like you." And this career also, I think, their dad didn't boost cars, did he? I'm trying to remember if
no,
that
no, no.
happened.
Their
No,
their
because
their
his dad
dad
owned a
ran.
grocery store.
No, I'm pretty sure the dad actually ran an auto shop of his
Oh,
own.
that's what it was. Yeah, it was an auto
Yeah.
shop or a dealership. Yep.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was there's at least an auto shop and
Mm-hmm.
possibly a dealership attached, and so when he died, the whole family just just this vacuum formed,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden Memphis is stealing cars and all that, and even though the director's cut of this movie doesn't add a whole lot, you and I talked about this a little bit ago. The director's cut of this movie only adds, I think, something about 15 extra minutes of footage,
Mm-hmm.
and the majority of it is just for the car scenes, or the
Yeah.
car chase. I think,
Which
I think,
worth it in that by itself.
well, you would say it's worth
Mm-hmm.
it, but there's one part of it that the only difference is that they show the pedals of the car from a different angle. Like that's literally all you get in the sequence of this. But
It was a sexy angle, thoh.
it
Totally
was,
sexy,
it
sexier
was,
angle, but there
yeah.
wasn't time for it.
Yeah, the sun hit the pedals just right in that, and I started to lick the top lip a little bit, but
Mhm.
the, but the director's cut though, it actually redoes the sequence in the beginning where Memphis first comes back to town, and you see just how much of a wreck that Kip is.
Mhm.
He's cooking what looks like eggs, but they're just colored, and I think they're burnt, and
Definitely burnt.
he drops that entire shaker of salt on it. Um, and in the extended edition, they actually go a little bit more into that. They actually kind of skip that whole sequence,
Mhm.
and it's really just analyzing the discussion between these brothers and what's happened, and
Mm-hmm.
why there's some angst there, and Kip really just lays in to Memphis. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you see that discussion later on, right? Like Memphis totally just plays the part of older brother in that conversation. And it's just like when you were a kid at the store and you pissed off your parents and they say, "We'll talk about this when we get home." Um, it was one of those moments
Mm-hmm.
where Memphis is like, "You know what? I'm just gonna let you vent, but later on, you're really gonna know what the truth is." And so in the extended edition, it makes a little more sense when they get to that point where he talks about why he boosted cars, why he loved doing it, and why he gave it up because he loves his brother that much.
Yeah.
And so that, once again, this is why the people who reviewed this movie and just bombed it, I don't think they ever saw that extended edition, but all of the frame or all of the building blocks for a really solid movie are here.
Mm-hmm. No, and I just even with that scene in itself, one thing that I really like what the director, maybe why they chose the original scene is because like you said, it was much more condensed and they focused more on how Kip's life is basically it's spiraled out of control. And they tried showing it in this one little scene. Granted, the fact that it's already been established his life is out of control because I think just 2 scenes before this, he was chained to the steering wheel of like an 83 Firebird that was in a car compactor. And he was about to die. But anyway, in this scene where he's making breakfast very, very poorly, as you can tell, because he dumped the whole thing of salt in on whatever it is that he was cooking. At one point, he's talking about how I've got like everything's fine now. Thanks for doing the one thing, but I've got everything under control. And as soon as he says that, whatever he was cooking starts on fire. It's just a nice little way of showing that he is not in control of the situation at
Mm-mm.
all.
Well,
And then so
yeah.
they like when they I think maybe the reason why they may have cut out the fuller part of this from the extended edition is because later on in the movie when there's a part where I think they're on the porch of Kip's house and they have a discussion again over a little bit about like, hey, you left and all this happened and you're back now and you think everything's great, but like, my life is screwed up because you left.
Yeah. I mean, he really lays it into him,
Mm-hmm.
like, and that's what's really good about this, though. Um, that's where I think there's a good amount of exchange there, where another action movie probably wouldn't even care about this stuff,
Mm-mm.
right? And as far as Kip goes, you mentioned how he said he had everything under control. That's why I think if you were a fan of the director's cut and you weren't a fan of the regular edition or whatever, one of the reasons why Kip does not have it under control is because of a deleted scene that they had where in the very beginning when they steal the first car
Oh
and
yeah, the
and
Porsche
they
911.
yeah, he's
Mm-hmm.
in the Porsche, he's at the stoplight and he's trying to, race off the line with the other guy there.
In a stolen car, very smart.
Yeah. Yeah, he says some pretty colorful things to this guy's girlfriend in the
Mm-hmm.
passenger seat. And and this is after he just used a brick to break into this dealership, right?
Which
And
last I checked is not a tool. It's a damn
no,
brick.
it's not a tool. Yeah, it might as well just call the prison and make reservations at that point. And and so in this scene that only made it into the director's cut, um, when you just watch how poorly Kip is running everything,
Mm-hmm.
I think it may be the reason why it is a director's cut is because it's so blatantly obvious that Kip has done everything wrong that he possibly could, that it does kind of render the theatrical edition, maybe not as impactful, right? Because
Yeah.
when you start to throw all these things in, um, it does lessen the impact of some of those other scenes that we've talked about here a few times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I would actually say if you're gonna watch this movie, like don't actually watch the director's cut.
No,
Just
watch the theatrical. This is
yeah.
a good one there. And what also I love about this movie is when you have the Memphis character who left, and it seems like a heart like I would say his leaving definitely took the biggest effect on Kip, and that's where the movie does focus. However, it does ripple out to his friends that he had when he was younger, and you see that with Sway. Um,
Yeah.
which is
He's just
really good, and
working.
why that relationship is strained. And it's more than just like, hey, we used to go out and now we don't, and things are weird. Um, they go into a scene where they talk a lot more about how like Memphis is like, you know what, I went straight. I was trying to help you do the same.
Mhm.
And she's like, well, we were at different parts of our life. And well, you're all, I'm gonna go straight and have a regular life at this point. I just wasn't ready for it yet. I was
Yeah.
too caught up in the excitement and the action of what we used to do, and I just couldn't walk away yet. And then now you see her, she's walked away from it. Um, she has to cut one conversation short because she has to go to work, despite the fact that she's already at work,
Yeah.
because you have to work twice as hard when it's honest.
Oh yeah.
So that's where you see her life pick up when you where you start with her life when he's going around trying to get the old crew together. And she's not on board, and she makes it very clear that your best intentions weren't the best for me at the time, and I'm probably not going to do this. And then she shows up and basically says she's doing it to save his little brother's life, Kip. But yeah, again, like you see, like his actions had weight to them before we even saw the movie, and it's not like an unrealistic weight at all.
No, no. And if anything, what I think the dynamic here is interesting is it's almost like a Sherlock Holmes and Watson
Mm-hmm.
situation for most of these other guys that had the former crime life that are now on the straight and narrow. Because especially for a guy like Donnie Astricky, as soon as he mentions that, we've got a job that we're going to put together, he's in a better mood.
Mm-hmm.
He
Oh, completely. He's like, oh yes, thank you. I can stop teaching driver's ed.
yeah. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of was the
Mm-hmm.
whole, Holmes and Watson thing. It's like just when Watson thinks he's out, Holmes pulls him back in. And
Mm-hmm.
and so it's funny to see how these people behave, once that happens. And um, one thing that's totally a curveball here that has nothing to do with what we talked about is just the fact that Master P is in this movie. Do you remember Master P from
Oh
the
yeah, I
the
remember
late?
Master P. He is a rival in this movie. He's a rival car booster.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And which once again, this is context that other action movies don't even really care to bring up a lot of times, right? Like throughout this entire
Mm-hmm.
movie, the Raines brothers are being chased by Master P's posse, right? Because he's used to getting the orders for stolen cars
Mm-hmm.
now because of the Raines not being involved, and so now he's coming after them. And that's the kind of stuff that you just don't see in other action films. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like it led to some comedy later on. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
some of the most quotable moments in this movie are because of Master P. Um, but once
Mm-hmm.
again, it's the context and it's how quickly we get it and how consistently we get it. And to me, it just means that when this movie was made, um, it's not like it was just bouncing around. I
No,
mean,
no. And again, like you said, like we know that because of Memphis leaving, it opens this power vacuum for stealing cars, and that's where like the Master P character is able to kind of rise. And now he doesn't like that business is getting taken away from him again.
mhm.
And even though like this, you can think of as like this is basically a side plot, but unlike a lot of movies, like the side plot's logical, and we see closure to that side plot fairly quickly. So if this was a reason that someone wanted to argue why this was like overstuffed with things, is that you've got this main plot and you've got like a subplot with the brothers, a subplot with Angelina Jolie, and now you've got this subplot with the other car thief. All of them like fit well together. I don't think like if you took the subplot of like Master P out, would the movie suffer from it? It wouldn't suffer. I don't think it would. But at the same time, like the scenes with Master P are both good. They establish skills of like basically skill sets of all the characters. The first time we see Master P is when Sphinx also like makes his like he actually joins
Yeah.
instead of like being on the other end of the phone not talking. So you see that he's like this big like tough guy not to be mentioned with, and we get the quintessential Vinnie Jones ball grab, which if you are familiar with his English football career,
Yeah.
that's a real thing. Like I think he still holds the record for the fastest ejection in a game
Oh
because
yeah.
like basically as soon as the ball like kicked off, he just reached down and grabbed some dude by the testicles and squeezed and twisted a bit and he was kicked out. So that was a
Yeah.
fun little reference to his own career, like his own career before acting.
Yeah. But
So
ramping up his
yeah.
badassery in
Mhm.
that scene, though, before he even minds the stepchildren, he literally makes the biggest Molotov cocktail of all time, where he puts that dirty rag in the gas tank
Mhm.
of his car, of Masterpiece car,
Oh yeah.
and just lights that thing up like the 4th of July. And so, his entrance is just it's absolutely what you would think a guy who doesn't
Mhm.
say many words would be capable of, right?
Yep. And
You
again,
know.
that's perfect though, because he doesn't talk. So his actions are far more grandiose than him saying anything.
Oh,
Until, of course,
yes.
eventually at the very end, he says something.
Oh yeah. Yeah, which we won't rob anybody of.
Mm-mm.
If you haven't seen Gone in 60 Seconds before, and maybe if this is the thing that gets you to finally do it, there are a lot of these fun little moments within the film
Mm-hmm.
that are peppered throughout. Some of it is as simple as a DMX reference, which is a great moment in the film.
Oh
Um,
yes.
but other than that, I mean, there's a lot of these small little fun scenes. We
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the Michael Pena scene as well, which
Yeah.
I don't want to rob that scene, but
Mm-mm.
it's another one of those fun little historical things that this group has dealt with a dog who likes to eat license plates.
and
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 yeah,
going back just 1 second, DMX, if you grew up the same time we did, you know that man provided you basically the soundtrack through high school and a good chunk of your college time. So just for DMX alone, if you haven't seen this movie, you need to go back and watch this movie.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. If you're a fan of his catalog in any capacity, give this one a shot. And I think that's really what the big point of this conversation was. It was
Hmm.
to illuminate some of the things about this film that say give it a chance, because if you just read the reviews on this, you would probably just say, well,
Oh,
Nick
you
Cage.
probably turned off to it. Like, no, I don't need to watch this movie.
Yeah, I mean, and clearly other people have, right? Like they see that Nick Cage is in it and they're like, well, Nick Cage has made some really questionable decisions after, his whole bankruptcy thing and money matters and all those problems.
Hmm.
But in I'm not even saying this in jest. I mean, this is literally like the golden age of Nick Cage's, action movies. I mean, they're easy to consume, they're really fun.
Hmm.
And I think this was outside of the National Treasure stuff, I think this is really one of the last great action films with him, where it still has that charm. It doesn't have any of the grittiness that a lot of action movies took on, just instant rated R types of movies.
Yeah.
This was not one of those movies that relied on violence to get the job done.
No, I mean you've got like your gunfights. You've got, of course, it's the movie's about stealing cars, so there's going to be, of course, like there's especially the final car chase of the whole movie. Like, is that's what everything's building to. So of course there's lots of action in there, but like none of the action that's there is to the point where it becomes unbelievable.
Mm.
Um, there's no ridiculous headshot or um, I say exaggeration in the gunfights that are there either. Um, I think again, like I think it's a well put together movie. Um, Especially like again, like it doesn't overdo anything. The car jump, it's involved in it. There's one fairly big car jump. And opposed to a lot of car jumps out there, it doesn't look like grotesquely awful or bad. Like it looks, again, I think it looks believable. It is CGI, but for CGI of the time, I
Yeah.
think it's all right. I
For
don't think it's bad.
2000 CGI. I actually watched this on VHS
Hmm.
originally. So still on the original VHS for this. But when I saw the behind the scenes stuff for it, even back then, I had to stop and look at it and go, is that CGI? I mean,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
seriously did not know. I had no clue. And so when I went back and watched it, it's like, okay, now I can clearly tell that it is. But once again, this is based off of the opinions of folks we've read online that said that there's
Hmm.
things that don't seem believable. Some of this stuff just doesn't make sense. And this car ramp and the amount of distance he has, I think it's feasible he could get that kind of jump off of it.
I think he could too. And to be honest, if they gave him a shot, Nicolas Cage would have taken that.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Especially like if you obviously if you don't know this about it, like he did most of his own driving in that movie. He didn't want to have a stunt person take care of that for him. And a lot of the actors who did driving in the movie, like they they were there. Like Angelina Jolie talks about how she did driving school for that movie. One of the things that really I think it's a fun way she was taught to drive for the movie is the stunt guy was like, yeah, wherever you want to go, you put your hand at 12 o'clock and you just point and shoot. So you just move your hand to where you want to be, and that's what the car is going to take you. Um, which is also like a really great thing. I have a great appreciation for actors who are willing to like kind of go out of their way to do scenes in movies where normally be fine to just kind of like, we're going to pass this off to a stunt man or stunt woman to take care of.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think again, like I think given the opportunity, Nicolas Cage totally would have jumped the St. Vincent Bridge uh, if he was allowed to.
Yeah. I mean, if I were the director and Nick Cage asks me that, hey, can I make that jump? And I'd be going, you know what? It's going to give some good footage. If you're going to do it, let's do it.
And like, we have 12 cars for this. How many do we have left? Yeah, let him take the jump. He's fine.
Maybe that's the hidden meaning here is that Nick Cage did try it 5 times, wasn't successful. He said, yeah, let's fuck it. Let's just do CGI for
we're
this.
Down to lucky 7, Nick. We're going to have to cut you off right here. We don't know how many more, like this was the first scene we tried filming. We're going to need these last 7. Yeah. And all 7 of those survived.
So Joe, kind of like what we talked about with the Ghostbusters soundtrack and the original movie score.
Mm-hmm.
Gone in 60 Seconds also has a pretty solid foundation as far as the music that we're introduced to.
Yeah, I mean it's very very different than what you get in Ghostbusters, where we kind of have this tailored scoring to each scene, and instead we kind of get this basically arrangement of rock songs and pop songs that just fit specific parts of the movie very very well. So it was almost like a little more complex version of 2 buddies sitting around like, hey, you know what, watching this movie, it'll be really cool to hear right now is this car's flying through the air, the Rock Wilder. It's kind of like that, but with much more purpose.
And what's really funny about this is combined with the reviews that we saw for the movie, the rest of the world seemed to agree that at least the soundtrack was worth listening to.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm actually going to specifically reference are a couple of the top Billboard placements here for this soundtrack. Okay, now in New Zealand, so New Zealand's albums, which is called RMNZ, actually had this peak at number 48 back in 2000.
All right.
On the German albums, or the Official Top 100, it actually peaked at number 29.
Ooh.
And if we're going to look at the Swiss albums for 2000, or otherwise known as the Schweizer Hit Parade, it ranked number 26.
Wow.
Now, in the US, it actually managed to crack both the Billboard 200 at number 69, as well as Billboard's soundtrack albums at number 25 for that year.
Well, I'm sure one of those numbers is at least worth a nice giggle. But no, that's pretty good. Like when you think of I guess like the soundtrack stuff, that's very specific, but even just like album sales, people going out and buying a soundtrack as opposed to music that's explicitly by a band one person's interested in is really, really good that they hit those numbers.
Yeah. I mean, and that's not to say that all of this music was original, right? You just mentioned that there's a couple of recognizable artists that are on this. So I'm not going to say it's nearly as impressive as the Guardians of the Galaxy soundtrack, right? But in its own way, it's very functional, like you mentioned. And I can't think of a better way to sum it up than with the literal intro to the movie, which features Flower by Moby, who you might remember was pretty much all over the electronic music scene in the late 90s, early 2000s. Eminem makes fun of him because apparently nobody listens to techno, but Eminem, I listen to techno.
Still listen to techno. We listen to techno from other countries, specifically German.
Specifically German techno.
It's catchy. It's great. It's amazing. And just in case you found yourself at a party in New York City on New Year's Eve back in like 2006, no, that wasn't Moby at the party. That was just a bald dude. It wasn't actually him.
Or if you find yourself in my basement playing video games on 4 different televisions, drunk out of your mind on moonshine, German techno is also a great thing to bring to that arrangement.
Oh yeah.
But
Hmm.
yeah. But
Also really
ultimately,
great to
yeah.
troll your friends with when you say you're going to um play some nice natural sounds as you're going to sleep in a hotel room that you're all sharing, because though you find those sounds of nature really soothing and it helps you sleep, and then out of nowhere you're just hit with German techno. It's a classic Mark move, by the way. So if you find yourself staying in a hotel with this man and he says he's going to put on something soothing to fall asleep to,
And don't
brace
listen to me.
yourself.
Yeah.
The German techno that is to come.
Yeah, y'all have been warned. You're better off not trusting me with that. And but once again, music here as a way of helping us navigate a story. Um, we won't want to obviously go through every single soundtrack on here, or every
Mm-mm.
track rather, but once again, Flower by Moby is what really kicks off the film. And what it does is it's paired really well by essentially panning around what's either like a trophy room at the Rains residence, or like their office in the auto shop. You're introduced to a lot of elements, whether it's pictures of the family, or just trinkets that are around the room that kind of help you understand themes of the movie before you even really know them, right? Like we've got the Virgin Mary, and then we've got this little
Mm-hmm.
devil toy. We've got pictures of the family when they were all together, and then we've got images when it looks like it's like post their father dying, right? Like
Yeah, like suddenly the dad's just not around. I think, was there a funeral picture in there somewhere where everyone's like in like nice looking things? I might be just thinking of that off the top of my head because it makes sense, but that could be there.
if it's not a funeral picture, I know there's at least one where it shows a young Kip, and then it
Hmm.
shows like maybe like an older teenager Memphis, and you can clearly tell that he picked up the mantle of father figure once their dad
Hmm.
passed away. So even though this movie got beat up by a lot of people, this arrangement paired with this little like panning sequence and everything, it's once again focusing on stuff that you typically do not get from an action movie,
Hmm.
right? Like you're getting a lot of depth in just a really quick, I would say about a minute long, maybe a minute and a half. I mean, it feels like it's a lot quicker, but I mean, you get a ton of context in this sequence, and the old blues sounding, like it sounds like a southern song
A
almost.
little bit, yeah. It's got like something you can like stomp one foot to as it's going along when you're on a nice wooden porch overlooking something possibly a little swampy and bayou-esque.
And you're almost about ready to bust out the spoons,
Hmm.
but someone just pulls you back. Like
Is
each
it
time you're thinking about it, it's like, wait, no,
we don't do that here.
yeah, we're not doing spoons, not
No,
not
no.
here.
Mm-mm,
but
mm-mm.
but save them, just
Same.
not right now.
Yeah, we'll use them for
um
food later, not music.
and honestly, Joe, I'm surprised it took us this long to come back to it. But one of the other songs that just is used in almost all of the marketing material for this movie, the most iconic sequence in the movie itself, is obviously Lowrider by War.
Oh yeah. Hmm. It's definitely one that's has probably been made into like the most, it's I don't want to say maybe not memes, but it's probably, we could say it's been used in a lot of memes for it. But basically, I know I use it. There's an animated GIF of this sequence where the gang's just kind of like nodding to lowriders that's going off, and then Nicolas Cage just slowly moves both hands into the air as he closes his eyes and moves his head down, and violently shakes his two hands, and then mentally he's ready. Let's ride. Let's do
Yeah,
this.
that's right.
Oh yeah.
it,
So.
and the reason why that's so perfectly paired with it too is because we've talked about how the older generation and the new generation obviously
Mhm.
have some major differences, and they also have some things that they just kind of mutually gravitate to as well. So there's some common threads that they share, but this is one of those things that clearly is like it's just held by the old crew.
Mhm.
Like they all know about it, they've all seen it several times, it's not the first time they've done it, and it's something that clearly the new crew just, there's no way they could have possibly been exposed to it.
No, and they're clearly taken aback by it in this scene too, because you can see a few of them like kind of just completely baffled and confused by what's going on. Like they start like quietly trying to talk to each other, but then at the same time, there's someone telling me like, no, just don't worry about it. Don't do it now. Just let it go. Just let it be. Let them do what they need to. This is clearly
Yeah.
working for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Like Robert Duvall is like sitting there specifically looking at the young crew, and he's just kind of like, hey,
Hey, no.
this has to happen. This is
Yep.
part of the process. Yeah. And here's some more trivia that I just had to bring up when we started talking
Hmm.
about Lowrider. But funny story about Lowrider, it was recorded in 1974,
Hmm.
which, if you remember, is when the original movie came out. It was
Ooh.
1974. And then it was released in 1975. So
Hmm.
I just thought it was kind of funny that even though I don't know if they planned it this way, but it still lines up. There's a little bit of a connection there to the first movie if you look hard enough.
Yeah, that's very cool. Of all the little, like I said, they do like a really fun job of making just enough nods to that first movie or making connections to it without it being overwhelming.
Yeah.
But another scene that fits really well with a song was a song by the Cult, "Painted on My Heart," and this is another one that's used a
Oh yes.
lot for advertising the film. And I know there's a music video I think was made with shots from the movie
Hmm.
uh, for the music video. And the scene that it's in is you've got Memphis and Sway, who we said before are they clearly had this relationship and it fell apart when Memphis decided to not steal cars anymore, leaves town. Sway is still kind of dealing with that in her life all these years down the road. And they've stolen one car together. And it's, I believe, a 69 Plymouth Cuda that they're driving into, which of course was a girl's car. Because do you remember why it was a girl's car?
I only know that that's what they said. I don't remember why.
Oh, it's because out of like basically the center console, or I think it's the dash, Sway pulls out
Oh,
lipstick
lipstick.
that's the same color
Yes.
as the car.
Yes, I do remember that now.
Which is great because at
You know,
first you have the whole like reaction where she's like, "Oh, it had to be a girl's car," and Nicolas Cage is like, "What about a '69 Plymouth A or Cuda as a girl's car?" And she pulls out lipstick matches the color of the car. But so
yeah, so I guess if you ever hop into a car and there's lipstick that matches the color, you know exactly what kind of person drives it, apparently.
apparently that's just what it is. Like this couldn't have been a passenger. It couldn't have been really anything else. It's just specifically boom, that lipstick in there matches the car. This is a girl's car. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, according to Sway. Um,
Well,
but yeah, so
Joe,
they're driving
yeah.
that car
Oh,
on the way to steal another car. Um,
yes.
and that they park adjacent to the they find the car, they park outside of the house, they're waiting, uh, they're about to steal a car, the house lights come on, and then they go back into the car and they're kind of watching this intimate scene play out between the people in the house whose lights came on, and they're stuck in a small space together, and it's kind of forcing them to rethink and relive their own intimate moments they had
Hmm.
when they were both younger. So they're put right back into that, and as that's going on, slowly "Painted on My Heart" is like slowly coming in, and as they talk about it, and eventually they end up, you know, they're reliving like their past relationship together. They're watching something hot and heavy in a house, so they start making out themselves. And as soon as that happens, you hear that "Painted on My Heart," like the lyrics kick in, the music ramps up, and it just kind of really, really fits that scene very well in both the way that it was edited into it, and of course the content of the song "Painted on My Heart," which is at least, of course, a relationship that is fallen apart, but one person just isn't past it yet. Their face is still painted on my heart. So that was just another really great scene of how they took uh, basically like a pop rock song and weaved it perfectly into what was going on in the movie.
Yeah, and I'm happy you went into the context of the song itself, because what I was actually going to mention was a little bit more behind the scenes on this
Oh.
specific song.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Cosima DeVito recorded a version of the song, which is featured on her debut album, which was just called Cosima. It was
Okay.
released in Australia on October 11th, 2004. But that's not what we're here to talk about. What we're here to talk about was the fact that we mentioned Armageddon earlier in the Will Patton connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Aerosmith also recorded a version for Gone in 60 Seconds, specifically for the
Oh,
soundtrack. However, the version by the Cult is the one that ended up being featured, right?
yeah.
So
Okay.
it's possible that we almost could have had two just major Aerosmith covers showing up in two major early 2000s films, but we just got one.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, we
I
almost
feel a
had
little
two.
robbed on that, but I'm okay with it because I do like when the cult what the cult put up because I still have that in my Spotify playlist. It's still living there.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
I mean, Joe, it's a song that talks about an unforgettable love. I think we've all been there, right?
Oh, absolutely. Who hasn't been there?
Well, either way, it's once again it's a testament to the fact that someone who put together the soundtrack here. I mean, I think they had a fun time doing it, and ultimately it translates really well. Like it, in no way does the music that they picked for this movie date the film, right?
Hmm.
There's so many other early 2000s, late 90s movies where you hear the music right away, and you're like, wow, I immediately know how tapered the jeans are they're about to be wearing. You know, it does not happen here. It does not happen here. We've got really timeless music that's being used, and it's just a great addition to the rest of the film.
Yeah, I agree. And just every time that they place a song in there, it just works so well with what's going on. Like the ones we mentioned were perfect for the scenes, but like in just about any action movie, you get some sort of montage scene. In this case, it was I think it was "Stop the Rock" by Apollo 440.
Yes.
Was perfect. I think a perfect way to really kick off the fact that they're now okay. The one night boost has begun. We have to hit the ground running. And what better way to do that than "Stop the Rock"? It's just it really just amps you up and gets you ready to go out and steal 50 cars yourself. I almost did it the very night that we watched this movie for the first time with my friends. It's like, guys, let's go out, let's steal cars, which we ultimately decided not to do because we didn't really know how to steal cars. And it's a crime. That being the bigger reason is to not do it.
Well, that "Stop the Rock" song, it's the perfect like LFG song. And for those of you who don't know what LFG means, just Google it. It's just going to save me cursing one more time. But it came out in 1999, right? The song did. So it came out pretty close to the release of this movie, So in a lot of ways, this was the first time that I ever heard of the song. I don't think I'd really ever heard it anywhere else because I mean, the first time I heard it, I just assumed it was some mix that came out in the early 90s because it just kind of has almost like a retro feel to it, despite the fact that, it came out the same time the movie did.
Yeah.
Um, and so for those of you that, may be wondering, have I heard this anywhere else? Well, that's kind of what we're here for. This actual song would go on to be featured in Gran Turismo 3. It would also be used in the trailer for Disaster Movie, which I still haven't seen yet, but I've heard it's at least good for one or two laughs. And it was also shown in the Victoria's Secret fashion show in 2007, which I would expect it'd be very difficult to walk to this song, considering how fast it is. but, but hey, somebody gave it a shot. Um, and yeah, and finally in 2014, it was used for a Kia Sportage TV ad. So this song has managed to keep some legs under it.
Yeah. And also I find it kind of weird. There's used for a Kia Sportage, and a Kia Sportage was nowhere on the list of cars that needed to be stolen.
No, no,
No.
absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
And if there was a song out there that could stop the rock, or a car rather that could stop the rock, it would not be a Kia Sportage.
It probably wouldn't be. As a matter of fact, I have to imagine that if they were told to steal a Kia Sportage, they'd be like, go fuck yourself. We're not doing that. Just buy
Yeah.
your damn Kia Sportage.
just take it out of the take like 3% out of the deal and just
Mhm.
go buy
Just
yourself
go
that
get
Kia
it.
Sportage.
Yeah.
Yeah, just take it right off the top. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, dude, just another once again another example. Just a great pick for songs in a movie. It doesn't distract from what's going on, and yeah, just a great addition to this film. I can't think of a better way than to end it by talking through some of the list of the 50.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, we're not going to do a pop quiz here because there's no way to memorize every single name and the
No.
combinations that went with them.
Mm-mm.
So instead, what I wanted to do was
Okay.
ask you about some of these cars because on this list, there's a lot of things that seemingly would make sense that folks would want, right? I mean,
Hmm.
There's the Chevy Camaro Z28 that's on here. There's Aston Martins. There's several different Cadillacs. We've got Ferraris. We got Jaguars, or Jaguar, as the British would say in their commercials.
Jaguar.
Yeah, the Jaguar, I believe is how they say it.
The Jag.
Yeah, actor Mark Strong, who is the spokesman for Jaguar, says it exactly that way. But combing through the list, the 2000s list at least, one of the ones that popped out of me was the 1971 Di Tommaso Pantera.
Oh, yes.
Codename Kate. And I've only seen a handful of these in my lifetime. And the idea that you could find one in Long Beach during a weekend that you just possibly could have roped in 49 other cars, that one seems like one that I don't think would be, that's the only one that kind of removes a little bit of logic for me in this. How it's possible that one could possibly be there just at the right time.
Yep.
So that's one that stuck out really.
A little bit.
But there are other ones in here that I'm not quite sure would ever make a list. One of them being a 1999 Lincoln Navigator, codename Kimberly. I'm not quite sure why that one ever made the list in the first place.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's weird. Like, the reason why it's weird is not because there are no redeeming qualities to a Navigator. Navigators are they're nice cars, they're nice SUVs, but why would you need to have it stolen for you? Like, you can buy a Lincoln Navigator pretty easily, and I'm guessing that the guy who's having 50 cars stolen is going to charge more for them than a Ford dealership.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I don't mind Lincolns at all. Okay, we got a loaner one time when we had some service done on my wife's car, and we ended up getting a Lincoln to drive around, and we loved it. We thought it was great. But that's exactly the point. Like, why would someone need to steal a Lincoln Navigator? I mean, this, Raymond Calitri's posse, like his muscle, there's probably one of the guys in the parking lot pulling up in one of these things. I mean,
he could just gave it to him.
Yeah, you don't need to go find that.
No.
So that was another one on the list that really stuck out to me because it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Another one of them would be the 2000 GMC Yukon, codename Megan. Another one of those head scratchers. Why would you need to hire someone to go out and get that for you?
Yeah. Same thing with the Escalade, which is also the famous rent-a-cop scene is when they're stealing the Escalade. You can buy a Cadillac Escalade pretty readily. Why would you need that stolen?
Yeah, I mean, the same thing kind of goes for the 2000 Toyota Land Cruiser, codename Kathy. I don't know why anybody would need to steal that one. And the one of the ones that I did think was funny, because when you're looking at the lists of these, the 1950 Mercury Custom, aka Gabriella, they don't really give that one any screen time. But there were some of these interesting ones on here that they did. Obviously, we saw the Mercedes girls. We had Dorothy, Donna, Samantha, Ellen, Kimberly. Those ones are kind of hot cars. Cadillac got some love on screen. I couldn't remember if they did show all the Porsches though, because obviously they were kind of bundled together, but I can't remember if they did them all at once.
I don't think they did. Honestly, the only Porsche I really remember from it is the 911 from the beginning of the movie, which obviously they would have to steal again because the first one gets impounded. And unlike the other Mercedes, they don't go for that one in the impound. So they have to re-steal the Porsche. But I don't remember really seeing any of the classic, because I think they've got some like classic like 80s 911s on there that we don't really see any screen time with.
Yeah, I mean, the original 911 was Tanya, codename Tanya. Trying to think of the 88 959 would have been Virginia. But yeah, other than that, I couldn't remember actually seeing a whole lot of screen time for them. Because in a movie about cars, right, I would think you'd want to show off some of the rarest ones, in the bunch. And instead you're talking to yourself about a Ford F-250 modified pickup, codename Ann.
Yep. Also another just rare vehicle, a Ford F-250. You can't get those. Can't get those anywhere.
Yeah. Whoever this mob boss is that's trying to steal these 50 cars. God, we just can't find F-250s around here.
It's bizarre. Like, I know, like, we're in South America, but they don't sell F-250s in South America. We just need it.
Yeah. Head scratchers for sure. But at the same time, that's what I think. If you're a fan of Gone in 60 Seconds and you
Mhm.
haven't combed through the actual list of 50, you start digging a little bit.
Yeah.
There's some fun ones in there, but there are some very confusing ones as well. And going back to our point, right? Gone in 60 Seconds, it's not the most big budget film you'll ever watch. But it is one that has a ton of charm built within it. You know, you've got a ton of actors that have won awards that seemingly got roped into this. And even though they're not all playing main characters, I mean, they just knock it out of the park. So if for some reason you didn't give this movie a chance, you know, if you, next time you see it pop up on Netflix, you know, not a sponsor by the way.
No, not a
Um,
sponsor. Not a sponsor. We
next time
are
you see
we are
it, yeah.
sorely lacking in the sponsor department. If anyone would like to throw some cash our way.
Oh yeah, yeah. If you want me to sell one of those like those things you put on your tongue so that you can, you know, groom your cat, I'll give that a shot. but 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 giving things a shot. Gone in
Mhm.
60 Seconds absolutely deserves it. I think it's one of those at this point I'd even consider it a hidden gem because it's 20 years later. I
Yeah.
mean, it's one of those things. It's just going to get buried by time until it's rebooted again, which I'm sure it will be.
Everything gets rebooted eventually. Everything old is new again.
Yeah. In this case, it literally is new again because it's a reboot. But I think it's one of those rare cases where a reboot actually improves on the original. This one stands on its own and it develops its entirely own mythos. So for that, I think it's absolutely worth the time to sit back down and watch that one. Now, Joe, it's really a shame that this movie that still doesn't get more love.
Yeah, I mean, for entertainment value alone, this is really an early 2000s time capsule.
Yeah, I mean, even though the Cage Brockheimer connection has typically been money, it doesn't always mean that people are going to show up. But hopefully, with some of our insights today, at least 1 to 2 more people will give this movie another shot.
Yeah, and if you think A Brick is an underrated tool or this was an underrated gem of a movie, then join us in the conversation on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook by searching for Digital Dissect 1 or Digital Dissection, a nerd podcast. Please also leave us a review no matter where you found us, and be sure to tell a friend, as both of these really help us grow our channel and keep bringing you more content. Next week, we'll be taking a look at the Pokemon Go mobile game and mapping the journey it's taken us on so far. And until next time, keep on dissecting.